Ambassador Vorthak's clawed feet touched the cold metal floor of the human diplomatic station, and instantly he knew this place was beneath him. 10,000 years. That's how long his people, the Draken, had ruled the known galaxy. 10,000 years of crushing anyone foolish enough to challenge them. His scales, black as deep space and harder than most starship armor, caught the harsh overhead lights as he straightened to his full height. Nearly 9 feet of pure predatory evolution. His teeth alone were legendary, rows of serrated bone that could bite through reinforced steel like it was soft fruit. The airlock hissed behind him, sealing with a sound that reminded him of prey taking its last breath. Perfect. But then Vorthak saw the welcoming committee, and his confidence wavered for just a heartbeat. Just one human. A single, small creature waiting to greet the representative of the galaxy's most feared warrior race. The disrespect was almost amusing. The human stepped forward, and Vorthak's predatory instincts kicked in automatically, cataloging everything with the precision of a hunter who had never known failure. Mal. Young. Barely came up to Vorthak's chest, maybe 5.5 feet tall at most. Soft pink skin with no scales, no armor plating, no natural protection whatsoever. The creature wore some kind of uniform, deep blue with shiny bits of metal pinned to it, but underneath Vorthak could see how fragile everything was. The neck. Exposed throat. Vulnerable joints. This thing wouldn't last 3 seconds against even the youngest Draken hatchling. "Welcome to Station Valor, Ambassador," the human said, his voice carrying an emotion Vorthak had learned to recognize as friendliness. The creature extended one hand forward, fingers spread in that bizarre greeting ritual humans seemed to favor. Vorthak's translator implant identified the human as Lieutenant Jake Morrison. The ambassador reached out carefully, remembering the briefing about human fragility. Their bones broke easily. Their skin tore like wet paper. He'd heard horror stories from other species about accidentally injuring humans during simple handshakes. So Vorthak adjusted his grip, holding back 90% of his natural strength as his massive clawed hand engulfed Jake's entirely. "We're honored to host the Draken delegation," Jake continued, smiling wide. That smile bothered Vorthak more than he wanted to admit. Flat teeth. Completely flat. Herbivore teeth, designed for grinding plants, not tearing meat. Prey teeth. And yet those eyes. Something about them didn't fit. They faced forward like a hunter's eyes, not positioned on the sides of the head like prey animals. Strange. Very strange. The handshake ended and Vorthak pulled his hand back, relieved he hadn't accidentally crushed any bones. Around them, the station hummed with activity. More humans moved through the corridors, dozens of them, all going about their business like they didn't have a predator species in their midst. They chatted casually, laughed at jokes Vorthak couldn't understand, carried tablets and equipment with relaxed confidence. Not one of them seemed afraid. How had these creatures survived? That was the question hammering at Vorthak's mind as Jake started leading him deeper into the station. Their homeworld must have been paradise. Probably some peaceful garden planet with mild weather, abundant plants and zero real threats. That was the only explanation. They'd evolved in safety, never developing proper defenses because they'd never needed them. The station itself reinforced this theory. As they walked, Vorthak examined the construction with a critical eye. Functional, yes. The walls were solid enough. The systems clearly worked. But there was no elegance here, no artistic mastery of engineering like the Draken warships with their flowing organic designs. This place looked cobbled together from spare parts and desperate innovation. Welding marks showed where hull plates had been patched. Exposed conduits ran along ceilings. Everything screamed of a species that had clawed their way into space through sheer stubborn determination rather than natural superiority. "Your quarters are in Section 7, Jake explained as they turned down another corridor. His tone was light, conversational, like he was giving a tour to a friend rather than hosting someone who could tear him apart without effort. "We've adjusted the temperature to match Draken preferences, about 15 degrees hotter than we usually keep it. Also increased the humidity. Should feel comfortable." Vorthak nodded, making a sound of approval that came out as a deep rumble. At least they'd done their homework. The attention to his environmental needs showed respect, even if everything else about this situation felt wrong. They passed a viewport and Vorthak paused to look out at the planet below. The human homeworld. From space it looked almost sickeningly pleasant. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. Beautiful. Peaceful. Exactly what he'd expected. A soft world that had produced soft creatures. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Jake said, stopping beside him. "Home. Nothing quite like it." "Your world appears gentle," Vorthak said carefully. Jake's expression shifted into something the ambassador couldn't quite read. Was that amusement? Yeah, the human said slowly. It can seem that way from up here. They continued the tour. More corridors. More humans bustling about, none showing proper deference to a superior species. More evidence of humanity's bizarre rise to spacefaring status despite having no business surviving that long. The Galactic Council had strict rules about diplomatic protocols, so Vorthak kept his observations to himself. Even prey species deserved basic courtesy during first contact. That's what separated civilized species from animals. We've prepared quarters matching your environmental preferences, Jake said as they approached a large set of doors. Everything should be ready. Dinner will be served in the main hall at 1800 hours. That's about 3 hours from now in your time measurement. I think you'll find our hospitality quite memorable. Something in Jake's voice made Vorthak's scales ripple with sudden uncertainty. The human's tone had shifted just slightly. Was that anticipation? Challenge? The ambassador couldn't tell, and that bothered him deeply. For the first time since arriving, Vorthak wondered if he'd missed something important. Something crucial. These humans with their soft skin and flat teeth and impossibly casual attitude, were they really as harmless as they appeared? The thought vanished as quickly as it came. Ridiculous. 10,000 years of Draken dominance didn't lie. Vorthak was the apex predator here. These humans were just another prey species trying to play at being important. Still, as Jake walked away with that same easy confidence, Vorthak found himself staring at the humans retreating back and feeling something he hadn't experienced in a very, very long time. Doubt. Vorthak had attended thousands of diplomatic dinners over his long career. Boring affairs mostly. Lots of talking, careful political maneuvering, bland food designed not to offend anyone's biology. He'd expected tonight to be the same, tedious but necessary. The dining hall on Station Valor looked standard enough. Long tables arranged in neat rows. Soft lighting. The usual mix of alien species scattered throughout, representatives from a dozen different worlds making small talk while waiting for the meal service to begin. The ambassador had chosen a seat with a good view of the entire room, an old habit from his military days. Always know your exits. Always watch for threats. Not that he expected any real danger here, but instincts died hard. Around him, the various delegates chatted in their native languages, translators converting everything into a dull background hum of diplomatic pleasantries. Then, at exactly 1847 hours, 13 minutes before the official dinner was supposed to start, everything went wrong. The smell hit Vorthak like a physical blow. Blood. Fresh blood. Not the sterile, recycled air he'd been breathing since boarding the station. Not the bland, neutral sense of alien cuisine being prepared in kitchens somewhere far away. This was raw, primal, immediate. The scent triggered something deep in his brain, something that existed long before language, before civilization, before anything except the simple drive to hunt and kill and survive. His nostrils flared wide, pulling in more of that copper-sweet aroma. Rich, warm. The smell of life draining away. Every scale on his body stood on end. His muscles locked tight, coiling with explosive energy. His heart rate tripled in an instant, pumping combat hormones through his bloodstream. Blood meant prey. Wounded prey. Easy prey. The dining hall erupted into pure chaos around him. The Kelpin delegates, tall, herbivorous creatures with hooved feet and large eyes positioned on the sides of their heads, bolted for the exits immediately. Their hooves clattered against the metal floor in panicked rhythm, making sounds like drums beating a retreat. One of them crashed into a table, sending plates and utensils flying. Nobody stopped to help. They just ran. The Thuric warriors, massive beetle-like creatures with natural armor plating thick enough to stop plasma rounds, had their hands on their weapons within seconds. 3 of them formed a defensive triangle, their multiple eyes scanning for threats. One was speaking rapidly into a communication device, probably calling for backup. Even the Yithran diplomats, floating jellyfish-like beings who normally maintained an air of serene superiority, were pulsing anxious colors and drifting toward the ceiling as far from the floor as possible. Vorthak's pupils contracted into razor-thin slits, focusing with predatory precision on every moving target. His talons extended involuntarily, sliding out from their sheaths with soft clicking sounds. Sure. Ready. His jaw muscles tensed, preparing to bite down with bone-crushing force. Every combat instinct his species had refined over millions of years screamed at him to move, to strike, to dominate whatever wounded creature was bleeding nearby. But then his eyes found the source of the scent, and his entire worldview tilted sideways. Dr. Emily Brooks sat at the center table, completely alone now that everyone near her had fled. She was unwrapping something from a silver-insulated container, moving with the casual ease of someone opening a birthday present. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was calm. She showed absolutely no awareness of the panic exploding around her, or if she did, she didn't care. The blood smell intensified as she opened the container fully. Vorthak's talons scraped against the table edge hard enough to leave gouges in the metal. His vision tunneled, focusing entirely on this human female and whatever was bleeding in her possession. Emily looked up, finally seeming to notice that the dining hall had gone from pleasant conversation to terrified chaos in about 15 seconds. She blinked a few times, her expression confused. Then something shifted in her face, recognition maybe or understanding, and her mouth curved into a smile. That smile made Vorthak's blood run cold for reasons he couldn't explain. "Oh," Emily said, her voice cutting through the tense silence like a knife. She didn't shout. Didn't raise her voice at all. But somehow everyone heard her clearly. "Relax, it's only my lunch." She reached into the container and lifted out a massive slab of meat. The piece was huge, easily the size of Vorthak's head, and it was barely cooked. The exterior showed some charring, evidence of brief contact with extreme heat, but the center remained deep red, almost purple. As Emily transferred it to her plate, blood, actual blood, dripped from the meat, pooling on the white ceramic surface. Vorthak's brain struggled to process what he was seeing. This was meat. Raw meat. Bloody meat. The kind of thing predators ate after a successful hunt. Emily picked up her utensils. A knife and fork that suddenly looked less like dining implements and more like hunting tools. The knife especially. Vorthak recognized the design now. Serrated edge. Sharp point. That wasn't a dining knife. That was a weapon designed to cut through flesh and separate meat from bone. She pressed the fork into the meat, holding it steady. Then she brought the knife down and began sawing through the flesh with practiced efficiency. The blade cut clean through and more blood wept from the meat, running across her plate in dark red rivulets. Then Emily Brooks, this small human with her soft skin and flat teeth, lifted a piece of the barely cooked, bleeding meat to her mouth and bit down. Her jaw muscles worked. Her teeth, those flat, herbivore teeth that shouldn't have been able to handle this, tore through the flesh efficiently. She chewed slowly, deliberately, and a drop of juice ran down her chin. She didn't wipe it away. Vorthak stood completely frozen, his hunter's brain trying desperately to reconcile what his eyes were seeing with everything he thought he knew about the universe. Prey didn't eat like this. Prey didn't consume raw, bloody flesh with casual enjoyment. Prey didn't use knives designed for butchery while making eye contact with a room full of predators. But Emily Brooks did. She took another bite and Vorthak felt his reality cracking down the middle. The prey was eating like a predator. And she didn't look afraid at all. Vorthak's voice came out as a growl, his translator chip working overtime to convert his shock into something resembling diplomatic language. "You're carnivorous?" The word felt wrong in his mouth. These small, soft creatures couldn't be meat eaters. It violated everything he understood about how the universe worked. Predators looked like predators. They had claws, fangs, armor, venom, something that marked them as dangerous. Humans had none of that. Emily dabbed her mouth with a cloth napkin, completely unbothered by the 9-foot dragon creature looming over her table with barely contained aggression. "Omnivorous, technically," she corrected, her tone the same one someone might use to discuss the weather. "But yes, humans eat a lot of meat. Always have. This is called a ribeye steak, cooked rare. That means barely cooked, still red in the middle. Would you like to try some? I can have the kitchen prepare one for you." She gestured at the bloody meat on her plate like she was offering a friend a snack. Vorthak's stomach turned. Not from disgust at the meat itself, Draken ate flesh too obviously, but from the wrongness of seeing this tiny vulnerable thing consuming it so casually. Jake Morrison moved forward quickly, probably sensing that the ambassador was about 3 seconds from either fleeing or attacking. The young human tapped something on his wrist device, and a holographic display flickered to life in the air between them. Floating diagrams and charts appeared, glowing soft blue in the dining hall's lighting. "Perhaps some context would help, Ambassador," Jake said, his voice steady and professional. "Let me show you our evolutionary history. I think it'll explain a lot." The first image that appeared was a human skull, rotating slowly in 3 dimensions. Jake highlighted the eye sockets, which faced forward from the front of the skull. "Forward-facing eyes," he explained. "This is a hunter's adaptation. Predators need binocular vision to track prey through 3-dimensional space, to judge distances accurately when chasing or attacking. Prey animals have eyes on the sides of their heads for wide-angle vision to spot threats. Humans have predator eyes. Vorthak stared at the diagram. He'd noticed the forward-facing eyes earlier, had even found them unsettling, but he hadn't understood what they meant. His own eyes were positioned the same way. Hunter's eyes. The hologram shifted, showing primitive humans running across an endless grassland. They moved on two legs, their arms swinging in rhythm with their stride. Behind them, a large four-legged animal bounded away, faster and more powerful. Our ancestors were persistence predators, Jake continued. We didn't rely on explosive speed or overwhelming strength. We evolved the ability to run for hours, sometimes days, without stopping. Our bipedal locomotion is incredibly efficient. We have specialized cooling systems. We sweat through our skin, which keeps our core temperature stable even during extended physical activity. Most animals can only run hard for short bursts before overheating. Humans just keep going. The hologram showed the chase continuing. The animal grew tired, slowed. The humans maintained their steady pace. Eventually the animal collapsed from exhaustion, and the humans closed in. While your people evolved ambush tactics and explosive power, Ambassador, humans evolved endurance. We couldn't outrun our prey in a sprint. So we followed them until they couldn't run anymore. Then we killed them while they were too exhausted to fight back. Vorthak's scales rippled with uncomfortable realization. That wasn't hunting. That was psychological warfare. That was torture. Jake highlighted another part of the human anatomy, the shoulder joint. Our throwing arms evolved specifically for hunting. Look at this range of motion, this ball-and-socket structure. Humans can hurl projectiles with incredible force and accuracy. A trained human can throw a spear hard enough to kill from 30 meters away, and hit a target the size of your head consistently. We're one of the only species in the known galaxy with this natural adaptation for ranged attack. Emily set down her fork and pulled up another image on her personal tablet, adding it to the holographic display. It showed a human body, transparent, with various organs highlighted in different colors. You mentioned fragility, Ambassador. That's a common misconception. She tapped the heart, and a second heart appeared beside it. We have redundant systems for critical functions. If one part fails, others compensate. Humans can lose up to 40% of their blood volume and still survive with proper care. We've documented cases of humans surviving impalements, massive burns, falls from extreme heights, exposure to deadly temperatures, injuries that would kill most species outright. Our bodies are designed to take damage and keep functioning, Jake added. Because when you hunt by chasing prey for hours or days, you can't stop just because you're hurt. You either finish the hunt or you starve. The hologram changed again, showing massive creatures, things Vorthak didn't recognize but that looked incredibly dangerous. Huge tusks, thick fur, bodies the size of small spacecraft. Woolly mammoths, Emily said quietly. Cave bears. Giant ground sloths. Saber-toothed cats. Our homeworld used to have dozens of megafauna species. Massive animals that could kill a human with one blow. The images flickered, showing primitive humans with simple stone tools pursuing these giants across frozen landscapes. We didn't outmuscle them, Ambassador. We outlasted them. We tracked them across continents. We learned their behaviors, their migration patterns, their weaknesses. We followed them through ice storms and heat waves. We followed them until they couldn't run anymore. Then we took them down with tools, tactics, and teamwork. Jake's voice dropped lower, and something in his tone made Vorthak's blood chill. Humanity drove dozens of these megafauna species to complete extinction before we even invented agriculture. Before we built our first cities. When we were still living in caves and hunting with sharpened rocks. Not because we were stronger than them. Not because we were faster. Because we were relentless. Because we never ever stopped coming. Vorthak looked back at Emily's plate, at the bloody meat she'd been eating so casually, and suddenly understood what he was really seeing. This wasn't a prey species mimicking predator behavior. This was an actual predator, one that evolution had disguised in a harmless-looking package. These creatures had hunted down and destroyed animals 100 times their size through nothing but sheer, stubborn refusal to quit. And now they were here, in space, sitting across diplomatic tables from the galaxy's supposed apex predators. For the first time in his 3 centuries of life, Ambassador Vorthak felt genuine fear. Vorthak spent the next 3 days watching humans the way a hunter watches rival predators in its territory, carefully, constantly looking for weaknesses. Every movement mattered. Every habit revealed something. He attended their briefings, observed their training exercises, studied how they interacted with each other and with other species. The more he saw, the more disturbed he became. The fourth day brought a joint military exercise, something the Galactic Council had arranged to foster cooperation between species. Standard procedure for first contact situations. Put your military forces through simulated combat together, see how well they work, build trust through shared experiences. Vorthak had participated in dozens of these over his career. They were usually boring, predictable affairs where everyone played nice and nobody wanted to embarrass themselves. This one was different. The scenario was straightforward enough. Human forces versus Draken forces in a simulated urban combat environment. The simulation technology was top-notch, using hard-light holograms and sensory feedback to make everything feel real without actual injury. Pain receptors would register hits. Soldiers would die and be removed from the simulation. But nobody would actually get hurt. Perfect for showing off military capability without starting a war. The first engagement lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Vorthak timed it. The Draken forces, even in simulation form, were devastating. They moved with the speed and power that had made them legends. They hit the human positions like a tsunami, overwhelming defenses through sheer physical superiority. Human soldiers went down fast, their lighter armor and smaller frames no match for Draken combat prowess. The simulation declared it a total victory for the Draken side. Vorthak allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Good. The natural order remained intact. But then something strange happened. The humans didn't pack up and leave. They didn't make excuses about equipment failures or unfair conditions. They just reset the simulation and attacked again. The second engagement went almost identically to the first. Draken forces crushed the human positions in under 5 minutes. Another clear victory. The humans reset and attacked a third time. Vorthak moved to the Tactical Observation Center where human command staff were coordinating their forces. Commander Tom Williams stood at the center of a holographic battle display, his face showing a nasty gash from where a simulated weapon had struck him before his death in the previous round. The wound was real. The simulation's feedback systems could cause minor injuries to make the experience authentic, but Williams ignored the blood dripping down his cheek. Third wave, adjust approach vector, Williams said calmly, moving tactical markers across the display. They're weakest on the eastern flank. Fourth wave, prepare flanking maneuver. We've got their pattern now. A younger officer standing nearby checked her data screen, her expression worried. Sir, we've lost 60% of our forces across the first 2 engagements. Morale is dropping. Williams didn't even look up from his tactical display. He just shrugged like she'd mentioned it might rain later. Then we'll make those losses count. Every time we engage, we learn something new about how they fight. They're running the same playbook they've used for centuries. We're not. Vorthak felt his scales prickle. That wasn't the response of someone losing. That was the response of someone conducting an experiment. The third engagement lasted 6 minutes. Still a Draken victory, but the margin was narrower. The fourth engagement went 7 minutes. The fifth, 9 minutes. By the sixth engagement, human forces were holding positions that should have been overrun in seconds. They weren't fighting with more strength or speed, they couldn't, their biology hadn't changed, but they were fighting with terrifying precision. They knew exactly where Draken forces would attack, exactly how long each assault would last, exactly when to fall back and when to hold ground. The seventh engagement ended in a human victory. Barely, but a victory nonetheless. The Draken forces, still using their traditional tactics that had worked for 10,000 years, suddenly found themselves outmaneuvered by opponents who shouldn't have had any chance at all. When the full exercise concluded, the official results showed Draken forces winning 4 engagements to humanity's 3. On paper, the Draken military remained superior. But Vorthak knew better. He'd seen the progression. He'd watched humans adapt in real time, learning and adjusting with every defeat. Given another 3 or 4 engagements, they would have won consistently. Given 100 engagements, they would have developed tactics that made Draken forces completely obsolete. After the simulation ended, Vorthak stood in the debriefing area, still processing what he'd witnessed. A human marine approached him, her armor scorched black from simulated plasma fire, her face marked with feedback injuries that would heal in a few hours. She was grinning like she'd just won a prize. "Good fight, Ambassador," she said cheerfully, extending her hand for that bizarre human handshake gesture. "Your people are impressive warriors. Really pushed us hard." Vorthak stared at her name tag, Lieutenant Rachel Bennett. He'd watched her die 3 separate times in the simulation. "You died 3 times?" he said, genuinely confused by her enthusiasm. "Why are you smiling?" Rachel's grin somehow got wider. "Yeah, but each time I learned something new. First time, I learned your people always go for high ground advantages. Second time, I learned your reaction time to flanking maneuvers. Third time, I learned how long your soldiers can sustain maximum combat speed before they need to recover. That's kind of our thing, you know? We're really good at making mistakes and then never making them again. Also, we're excellent at refusing to quit. Usually, those two things are enough to win eventually. She patted his arm, actually touched him like he wasn't a creature that could tear her apart, and walked away laughing with her squad mates. They were comparing notes, discussing what they'd learned, already planning how to improve for next time. Vorthak stood frozen watching them go. And in that moment he understood the terrible truth. Earth hadn't sent prey seeking protection among the stars. They'd sent apex predators evaluating the competition, figuring out how everything else hunted so they could learn to hunt it better. The galaxy had made a catastrophic mistake. Vorthak stood alone in his private quarters aboard the diplomatic station, staring at the communication console. His clawed hand hovered over the activation button for longer than he cared to admit. This report would change everything. Once he sent it, there was no taking it back. The Draken High Council would know that their ambassador, a warrior who'd served for 3 centuries without question, was about to recommend something that would have seemed like treason just a week ago. He pressed the button. The secure channel opened, and moments later, his image was being broadcast directly into the council chamber on his homeworld, light years away. He could see them on his screen, 23 of the most powerful Draken in existence, seated in their traditional circular formation. High Chancellor Drakath sat at the apex position, his scales darker than Vorthak's, marking him as even older and more experienced. Vorthak took a breath and began speaking. His words came out measured and deliberate because he needed them to understand. Really understand. Humanity is not prey, he stated flatly, watching their reactions on the screen. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. One made a dismissive gesture. They are apex predators disguised in prey species bodies. Everything about them that appears weak is actually an adaptation to a hunting strategy we cannot match. Drakath's growl rumbled through the speakers, making Vorthak's console vibrate. You suggest we should fear these humans? Ambassador, they're half our size. Their bones break easily. They have no natural weapons. I've seen the biological reports. What exactly are we supposed to be afraid of? Vorthak had expected this reaction. He pulled up footage from the military exercises, letting it play on their screens. Size is irrelevant, Chancellor. Humanity evolved on a death world where they were smaller and weaker than most of their prey. Think about that. They weren't the biggest or strongest creatures on their planet. They were somewhere in the middle. So they compensated by becoming the most persistent, adaptable hunters in known space. He highlighted sections of the battle simulations, showing how human tactics evolved with each engagement. We Draken ambush our enemies, dominate them with superior force, and move on to the next target. It's worked for us for 10,000 years. But humans? They study. They learn. They dismantle. Watch how they fight. They don't seek glory or dominance. They seek victory through any means necessary. The council chamber had gone quiet now. They were actually watching the footage, seeing what Vorthak had seen. Humans losing, then adapting, then winning. They'll lose 100 battles to win the war, Vorthak continued, his voice dropping lower. That patience, that absolute refusal to accept defeat, makes them more dangerous than any species we've encountered. And here's what truly terrifies me. They've been perfecting warfare against themselves for 10,000 years. Not against other species. Against each other. Every major conflict, every war, every battle taught them new ways to kill more efficiently. They've spent millennia learning how to fight opponents who think exactly like they do. He pulled up historical data from Earth's military history. Images of ancient battles, medieval sieges, modern warfare. The progression was horrifying, humans constantly innovating new ways to destroy each other, each generation building on the lessons of the previous one. Do you understand what that means? Vorthak asked. We've been fighting other species with different biologies, different tactics, different thinking. They've been fighting themselves, opponents who are just as stubborn, just as adaptable, just as relentless. They've had to constantly innovate just to stay ahead of their own kind. One of the council members spoke up, her voice sharp. What do you recommend, Ambassador? Surely you're not suggesting we simply accept this threat. Vorthak met her gaze through the screen. Alliance. Immediate and unconditional. The chamber erupted in shocked growls and protests. Drakath raised one massive claw, calling for silence. Explain. Because if we position ourselves as their enemies, Vorthak said quietly, they'll do what they do best. They'll study us until they understand us completely. They'll learn our tactics, our biology, our weaknesses, our psychology. Then they'll hunt us down with the same methodical patience they used to hunt mammoths across frozen wastelands. Those creatures were 10 times larger than humans, had natural weapons that could kill with one blow, survived in conditions that would kill most species. Humans hunted them to extinction anyway. He let that sink in for a moment before continuing. We have two choices. We can make humanity our enemy and eventually be destroyed by them. Or we can make them our allies and benefit from having the galaxy's most terrifying predators on our side. Better they hunt with us than hunt us. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Then Dra. Kath spoke. All in favor of alliance? The vote was unanimous. Back on Station Valor, Emily Brooks sat in the same dining hall where this had all started, eating another rare steak for lunch. Her personal tablet chimed with an incoming message, the official diplomatic agreement from the Draken High Council. She read it once, smiled, and sent a quick message to Earth Command. First contact successful. The Draken understand now. They finally realized what it means when a human sits down to lunch. Jake Morrison walked up behind her, reading the message over her shoulder. He laughed. Think they'll spread the word to other species? Emily pulled up her intelligence monitoring systems, showing intercepts of alien communication channels across multiple species and languages. Oh, they already are. Listen to this. She played several audio clips. Different voices, different languages, but the translator converted them all to the same message. Warnings spreading through diplomatic channels, military networks, civilian news broadcast. And across all of them, one phrase kept appearing with equal parts respect and terror. Never interrupt a human's meal. Jake shook his head, still grinning. Well, that's one way to make an impression. Emily took another bite of her steak, the blood from the meat pooling on her plate. The galaxy needed to learn eventually. We're not here looking for protection. We're not prey hoping the big predators will leave us alone. We're hunters. We've always been hunters. We just don't look the part. She gestured at the viewport showing Earth in the distance. Our ancestors climbed their way to the top of the food chain on a planet that actively tried to kill them. They hunted animals that could crush them with one blow. They survived ice ages and droughts and predators with natural weapons we could never match. And they did it all without claws, without armor, without venom. Just stubbornness and refusal to quit. Jake nodded. And now we're here showing the galaxy what real apex predators look like. Emily raised her glass in a quiet toast. Welcome to the food chain, Ambassador Vorthak. Welcome to the food chain.